There's a moment, and maybe you know it, where the dust is settled, the papers are signed, the funeral is over, the chapter has technically closed, and the world expects you to move on. But you're still standing in the wreckage of it, trying to figure out who you even are now. Today's guest knows that space intimately, not just from the outside looking in, but from living inside it herself. Erin Snow has navigated childhood trauma, loss, and divorce, and rather than arriving at a tidy resolution, she arrived at a question. What do people actually need in the aftermath, and why is it so rarely available? Out of that question, she built something, the unmuted room, a space that sits outside therapy, outside coaching, and outside the noise of people trying to fix you. A space built around one radical and underrated act, truly listening. Erin, welcome. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for having me.
Of course. So I'd like to start just by understanding your work. So your work centers on something really specific, the space after something has happened. How do you describe that space to someone who might not have words for it yet?
So, this space is really what you want to make of it. If you're going through something, if you've been through something, if you're about to go through something, that this is a space where you can come and experience all those feelings. Don't ignore them, process them, talk about them. And I'm here to be a witness to that and to hold space and to listen so that you can really hear your own voice and say the things out loud that we're scared to say out loud, that we're scared to say because somebody might judge us or somebody might think that's strange, or why are you upset about this, or why haven't you moved on? You've been talking about this so much. I'm sick of hearing it. Um, and so this is that space where you get to do that. And all of those questions that I just named, like, they're off the table. They're off the table.
Wow. And, I think that's something that we don't talk about a lot is the afterwards, and people expect you to bounce back and not have that space. And so, why do you think this part, the aftermath of experiencing, after something has happened, gets skipped over so quickly? Why don't we talk about it more?
I think just in our culture, we're in a hustle culture and people don't have a lot of time, and people are expected, like you said, to bounce back and get right back into things. I mean, we put time limits on when things happen in the workplace, for example. So somebody has a baby, you have X number of weeks, and then you're expected to bounce back and go back to work. And maybe you're not ready. Or bereavement leave, you have a family member that dies, and there's usually an employee policy that gives you 3 days. It's like in our culture, we set time limits on when we're supposed to be okay to go back to things like work. And so, with that expectation in mind, I think that we're just like, all right, we have to get to that point. And we don't allow ourselves the time to process because there is this deadline that we're faced with oftentimes. But also, too, I think that people, it hurts. It hurts to think about hard things. And so sometimes it's easier to just kind of put it in the back of our mind, or to just say, all right, I'm going to just get on with my routine. I'm going to do the things that I was doing before because it's really hard to think about that. And if I'm busy, then I'm distracted and I don't have to process that. And that makes sense. Like on a human level, like we don't want to hurt, we don't want to feel badly. But if we're not, it doesn't mean that those feelings go away. It doesn't mean that
Hmm.
how we're feeling after doesn't go away. My dad passed away, it will be 4 years in September. And there are moments that I'm still hit with it. Like randomly, I'll be in the car and something makes me think about him and I'm really sad. Like I have to honor those feelings. I can't push them aside. They don't always come up in the most convenient times. But ignoring them is not, there's not healing in ignoring. And so this space allows people to come in and heal and process and acknowledge on their own timeline.
That I think it's so important that just because you're not facing it doesn't mean they're still there. And
Right.
there is no timeline for grief. Absolutely. And so you describe the unmuted room as a place for truly neutral, judgment-free listening. Why is that so rare in friendships, in relationships, even in professional settings?
I think that people mean well. I'm coming at it from a place of that people generally mean well and have good intentions. And again, they want you to feel good. And how do we get you to feel good as quickly as possible? So let me come
Mhm.
up with the solution for that. Or even if it's like negative feedback, what we would perceive as negative feedback, it's really because they're like, "Hey, let me tell you what's wrong with this so we can get you to a solution and
Yeah,
fix this as quickly as possible." But that's oftentimes not what we want to hear. We just want to be able to say how we feel about something and let that sit there for a little while. Like, how often are we really doing that? We are talking with our friends, we're talking with our family after somebody loses a loved one, or they go through a divorce, or they're just struggling with the daily things that are happening in their lives. And we're like, okay, well, you just told me this. I'm not pausing. I'm not sitting with that for a little while. I'm not asking, what do you need? I'm immediately jumping to, okay, how do we fix this? Because I love you and I care about you and I want you to be better. So let's come up with a solution to this problem. Well, a lot of people aren't looking for that. They're looking for you to just be present, hear what they are saying, acknowledge what they are saying, and maybe that's it. And for us to ask the question, thank you for sharing that with me. What do you need from me right now? What would be helpful? And maybe the answer is nothing. You did it already. You listened. And I think just that, it sounds really simple, but it's really hard because we're problem solvers and we want
absolutely.
people to feel good and feel better. So that's what our go-to is. But that's we need to really stop and ask the question, what is it that you need from me in this moment? And that's the
Absolutely.
piece I think we're missing.
And so what shifts in someone when they feel genuinely heard when you're able to sit with them? Have you witnessed those moments with the conversations that you've had?
Yeah, it's honestly, it's an honor and I'll say a joy to be able to see they're going through oftentimes really difficult things. And they're sharing those sometimes for the first time. But for them to come in and, they're brave, they're trying something that really no one has really heard of. And they're like, all right, I'm going to try this professional listening thing. And they're like, I'm not really sure what to expect. And then through the course of a listening session, I've seen clients stop themselves and, have those aha light bulb moments of like, oh my gosh, this is what this feels like. And, or I didn't know I had these feelings about this particular issue, but I'm hearing myself saying it out loud. I'm giving myself the space and the time to say this out loud. Holy crap, I had no idea that I was going to have this kind of reaction. And for me, when I say that there's a joy in seeing that, it's a joy to witness this empowerment that people find here, this relief that people find, and that I get to be present for that. It's not about me, but to be able to witness that and to be able to provide that, it's honestly an honor and I a privilege that people trust me with their stories, with their pain, with their joys, with their all of the things, disappointments, overwhelm, their burdens, that they come here and trust me with that and are able to walk away and feel lighter, refreshed. I ask people usually, especially my newer clients, I'll say, all right, to start off, why don't you just describe a word to give me a word to describe how you're feeling right now? Like, what's your word? Where are we at? It's a good jumping off point. And a lot of times I hear, I'm overwhelmed, I'm burdened, I'm sad, I'm hopeless, I'm despairing. And then I'll do the same thing at the end of the session. And it's okay if the word hasn't changed, but so often it does. And it's my hope cup is filled. I have joy. I'm I'm hopeful now. I feel relief. I feel lighter. Like the
Oh,
transition in just a short amount of time is incredible.
that's amazing. What an incredible opportunity for you to be able to witness that kind of transformation and be there as someone navigates through, those big emotions, those big feelings and getting them to the oty side. And so a word that has come up is emotional bottlenecking. So what does that actually look like? So not in clinical terms, but in everyday life.
So I really it's so for me, it's the bottleneck where it thins out like everything's you have a wider if you think of a bottle, like a wine bottle,
Hmm.
right? It's full at the bottom, it's bigger, and then it gets really short where you're pouring it out. So if you have all of these emotions and they're all trying to get out and they're all stuck, it's like a traffic jam. You can't let it out. It's like so it's stuck. It's in there and it's not coming out. You can dump the bottle and it's not going anywhere. Eventually, it's just going to explode. It's because there's so much pressure. And I use this example a lot of, um, you hold everything in and it can start small, can be the little things, but then, maybe there are some big life moments too that you're struggling with, but you don't talk about them. You're ignoring them, you're pushing them away. And you do that every single day. And then you're in the grocery store, for example, and, somebody, it's tight in the grocery store and
Yes.
you're turning your cart and someone accidentally bumps into you and you just lose it. You just absolutely lose it. Like it was an accident. It didn't mean to happen. Like they're very sorry, but you've just held it in for so long that it exploded. And so to be able to release that in some way, to open the valve in some way so that you can create space and room to process and let these feelings out. So there isn't this traffic jam.
I love that, and I'm a very visual person, so I can completely imagine, like, the wine bottle or the traffic jam and just like, yes, that resonates with me.
Yeah.
I absolutely feel that. And so what happens long term when we have these traffic jams or, we have these emotions that are stuck when we don't have a place to put or to share what we're carrying?
um, I mean, I think a lot of things can happen. Something that comes to mind right away is that if we aren't acknowledging our feelings, it makes it really difficult for us to be present for the feelings of other people that we care about. It's the oxygen mask, right, on the airplane, another visual.
Mhm.
Like, everyone says, "Put the oxygen mask on first before you put it on somebody else," and that is a really I'm a mom, that's a really hard thing for me to think about. Of course, I'm gonna put the mask on my kid first before myself, but if I'm not taking care of me, if I'm not taking care of and acknowledging my feelings and my emotions and what's going on for me, it's going to make it really hard for, 1, myself to move forward, but also 2, for me to be present for the people and their feelings and emotions because all of mine are just going to be stuck inside me that I can't handle. I'm not going to be able to take anything else on. So it's self-care, but it's also community care for the people that we care about.
I love that. It is hard to put yourself first, especially as a parent.
Yeah,
But it is. You have to, or else you're not going to show up in the way that you want for, like you said, the ones that you love.
exactly.
And so if we could move into rebuilding identity. So you've sat with these tough conversations.
Mhm.
You've helped others process how they're feeling and their emotions. And so, what does it actually look like to rebuild yourself when the event is over, but the world has already moved on and stopped watching?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It's hard. Acknowledging that that's hard. Um, so I have had, you mentioned in the intro, 3 really big events happen in my life. I was sexually abused when I was around 9 years old. I went through a divorce. My dad died from early onset Alzheimer's. And, some of those events have crossed decades. And, um, and there are others sprinkled in too, but, uh, those have spanned decades, and there are times where I still really wanna talk about the thing. I really, really wanna talk about it, and, people are there for the moment when it happens. And, everyone's showing up at a funeral after a funeral with their casseroles and their flowers and, the cards, and that's lovely and supportive. But for the person, it doesn't just stop there. It continues on. And I think the best way that we can help ourselves and help others going through this is by don't just show up for that moment. And I've said this before, it don't just show up for that moment. It's still living on for that person and continuing to check in on them. And it doesn't have to be all the time, but like, even a year later, um, you know, "How are you doing? I know your dad died. How are you doing?" Or, "Hey, I know this big thing happened, and I just wanna check in and see how you're doing," because we're really, really good at showing up in the moment that something happens, but it's the after, the care that we show ourselves and to others after, to show that we're still present and thinking about them. So, I guess how to rebuild after is acknowledging that just because the moment might be over, that it's still in us. There's still a piece of that we are dealing with and processing and grieving, and it doesn't just go away, and that's okay. It's okay. And I think that simple thing of just saying, "It's okay," and leaning into that when you do need to lean into it and acknowledging that, and having people around us who are willing to still show up and talk to us about it after the fact. And that's hard to do. It's uncomfortable. We don't ask people those questions because we don't want to bring something up that might make them sad. What if they're not sad and now we've brought it up? Well, I honestly think that someone asking that question, it might make them sad, but what they might be feeling more than sad is, "Hey, this person acknowledges that this might still be really hard for me, and they're asking about it and they care about it, and that means so much. Yes, it made me a little sad, but thank you for asking." I think that's how we do it. I think that's how we keep rebuilding is not ignoring it, acknowledging it, leaning into it when it comes up and knowing that that's okay, and having support people around us, whether it's something like this service or your friends or your family that are there when, you know, it's after but still very present.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. I think, we do live, like you said earlier, in a culture where we just want people to feel okay and we don't want to bring up those memories. But for someone who's lived through something really hard, it's nice that people are still thinking about us, or
Mhm.
thinking about how it may impact us. And so you felt something that intentionally sits outside therapy and outside coaching. Why was that distinction so important to you?
So I came to this idea um after my divorce where I didn't have anyone. I couldn't talk to anyone. I didn't tell my friends because I was afraid I was going to get judged and they would ask all the questions that I wasn't prepared to give answers for. I couldn't talk to my family because my dad was dying from Alzheimer's and I didn't want to put more on them. So I didn't have a space. And I had also previously done nearly 2 decades of work with domestic violence victims and survivors and family law cases. And common themes in what I was experiencing in those moments, and also what they were experiencing, my clients were experiencing, was that I don't want to be fixed. um, don't want a diagnosis. I need somebody who will listen to me. And that can look like a lot of things. Maybe that's therapy for somebody, maybe that's coaching. For me, that's not what I was looking for. I literally just wanted a space where I could sit down, I could let out a deep breath, and I could just talk and let it out with no expectation that there was gonna be an outcome other than, "Hey, there's this person who genuinely cares sitting across from me and wants to be here and share this moment with me." Um, people I wanted another option for people because I didn't have this option. I'm like, I cannot be the only person that
Sure.
needs another option. And that's really what it is. It's not meant to replace any of those things. It's not meant to replace family or friends or therapy or coaching. It's another option for people who may find that those traditional methods don't work for them or it's not what they're looking for.
Absolutely. I think it's really nice just to be able to have a conversation with someone that, may not be invested or, have that history, right?
Yeah,
It's a neutral party that,
right,
cares about you, but you can
right.
speak openly. So I think that's so powerful. And, one thing we had talked a little bit about earlier was, wanting to help, wanting
Mhm.
to fix. And so what's the actual difference between being heard and being helped with the clients that come to you or in your experience?
Um, I think being heard is helping. Because that's the piece that I think we're missing so much is that we're listening to fix rather than listening to be present or listening just to listen. So that in my experience with my clients is the helpful piece is that, hey, this is what I was missing. I don't have this. People are listening to respond, they're listening to fix, they're listening to judge, they're listening X, Y, and Z. This is listening in a way as a means to help. Um, just letting it out, creating space, creating breathing room, creating a sense of safety that they don't have currently, where they can say all of the things that, I've had clients who are sitting in here and they stop themselves. They censor themselves. They're like, I can't say that. Like mid sentence, they stop themselves
Wow.
and say, I can't say that. And I said, yes, you absolutely can. You can say that here. And then they do. And then they come back and the censoring becomes less and less. And that feeling of freedom of just being able to let it out so that they can go about their day and just have the space outside. And I think that is so helpful. And so listening to be heard is listening to be helpful.
And so, what would you say to someone who feels like they're carrying more than they can put into words right now?
Um, I would say to don't feel the push or the need to put it into words. That's okay. I have clients who will sit with me for a while and maybe they just sit in the silence. We don't sit in silence. We don't allow ourselves to do that. We always feel the need to fill the space. It's why we respond so quickly. It's why we try to fix things. It makes us uncomfortable. Silence and space makes us uncomfortable. Um, but I have clients who will just sit for a while and they'll say, I'm just gonna sit here and I'm not sure how I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling something and I'm here and it's not awkward at all. And then they start talking and they start forming words. But I would say if you're not sure how to start, that's okay. And if it's helpful and if it's something that you want, that's why I often try to start with a word. One word. You don't have to put all, it doesn't have to make sense. And that's the beauty of this too. People feel they want you to understand. They want the other person to understand. And so they feel the need to explain. And here, this removes all of that. Like, it doesn't have to make sense to me. Like when we're having regular conversations, we feel that need to have it make sense. We want people to understand. We want people to get it. But here, it doesn't matter if I get it. It doesn't matter if I understand. I'm just here to hold that for you so you can understand, really. And it's really beautiful to watch that.
That's incredible. And so someone who may have someone that's going through something hard, how do you protect yourself, taking on these conversations and, ensuring that your well-being is protected as well? What would be your advice for someone who's maybe sitting in a space that's getting ready to have a really hard conversation?
Um, I would It's okay to check in with the people that you're gonna have a hard conversation about to see if they can handle it. And it's okay if you're the person on the receiving end if you can't. I think that's more kind to say, "I love you and I care for you, but I can't take this on. But here's maybe somebody who can." And offering that and just say, "I can support you in any other way." I think that's more kind than having somebody take something on and they're, like, checked out because they can't hear it. It's
Yep.
triggering for them, it's trauma, it brings stuff up for them that is really difficult, and then they're checked out, and then the person who's telling you the information feels like the person's not listening and they're not engaged and they must not care about me, when that's really not what's going on. So I encourage people, if you're having a difficult conversation or want to have a difficult conversation, make sure that that person's able to receive it. And if they're not, find another person, ask for resources, and it's okay if you can't take it on. For me personally, people ask me a lot. They're like, "Erin, you've been through a lot. You did domestic violence work for almost 20 years. People are telling you difficult things now. How are you still standing?" like,
Right.
and I'm like, look, for me, I this gives me energy. And because of my experiences, because of what has happened to me, and I didn't have a place like this. I didn't have people who I could talk to about these things. The fact that I'm able to do that for somebody else when it wasn't able to be done for me and I needed it so badly, that's my passion. This brings me purpose, and so I don't get burned out. I don't, have secondary trauma, um, vicarious trauma. It's not triggering for me because I'm able to provide something that I knew I so desperately needed. Um, that does not mean that in my personal life, I don't there are times where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose it." And what do? I go to the beach. I sit by the ocean, though I'm in New England and it's cold the majority of the time. Just sitting in my car and watching the waves and hearing that sound of it going across the rocks, that's very soothing for me. So I would just encourage people to find the thing that brings them joy. And even if it's a little snippet of it, whatever it might be, and your thing is your thing. No judgment, and do that thing when you're going through a hard time, even if it's just a little piece of it.
I love that. And so, Erin, as we close, how can people find out more about your work? How can they get in touch with you and learn more about the unmuted room?
Yeah. So my website, theunmutedroom.com, is a great place for information to learn more about the work. If you're listening to this and you're like, that sounds really cool, but I need to know more, or, what is professional listening? This is intriguing. This resonated with me. I want to know more. I offer a free 10-minute consultation. So you can check it out, ask me questions. That's all booked through my website. And I would just really encourage people who even a little bit are going, that sounds different. That sounds like something I could use. Check it out. There's no harm in doing a free consult. And so I really encourage people to do that.
Absolutely. So, thank you, Erin, for being here and not just for the conversation, but for what you've built and for the clarity you bring to something that most of us have felt but couldn't name. And What stays with me from this conversation is the idea that the space between what happened and who we become isn't empty. It's actually full of things that need tending, full of emotions that got bottlenecked, full of an identity that's quietly trying to find its footing again. And Erin, what you've created is a place to do that work, not through advice, not through diagnosis, but through the simplest and most underestimated thing we can offer each other: genuine presence. So, if something in today's conversation landed for you, if you recognized yourself in any of it, I want you to know that the unmuted room exists for exactly that reason. You can find Erin on her website and learn more, and we'll include it in our show links as well. And if this episode meant something to you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the best thing we can do for someone we love is hand them the words they can't find themselves. So until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and keep becoming who you're meant to be.